I know Bigfoot is real. I've seen it, and I've seen what that creature is capable of. My farm has been attacked by it many times now. I've got 3 missing cattle that vanished without a trace. And somewhere out there in those woods behind my property, there's something that doesn't belong in any nature documentary. I've been raising cattle for 15 years now on family land up in Idaho, right where the property backs up against dense forest and mountains. The property's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather cleared the land, built the original farmhouse, started the herd with just a dozen head. My father expanded it, added the big barn, put in proper fencing. Now it's mine, and I've put everything I have into keeping it going. It's remote, the way I like it. The farmhouse sits about 200 yards from the barn, a straight shot across what used to be the main pasture. Beyond the barn, there's nothing but trees and wilderness for miles. Dense pine forest that climbs up into the mountains, so thick in places you can't see more than 20 feet ahead. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles down the road. The nearest town is 15 miles away, population maybe 800 people. My wife and 2 kids live here with me. The kids are young, still in elementary school, and they love the space and freedom that farm life gives them. Running around in the fields, helping with chores, learning responsibility. It's a good life. Hard work, sure, but honest. And until last November, I thought the biggest threat we faced was the occasional coyote prowling around at night. Maybe a mountain lion passing through every few years. Standard rural problems that you deal with and move on. But things started getting strange about a month before everything went sideways. Other farmers in the area began reporting livestock going missing at night. Started with chickens at a farm about 3 miles east of us. Good guy, been raising chickens for 20 years. He woke up one morning and half his flock was just gone. No feathers scattered around like you'd see with a fox attack. No blood splattered anywhere. No sign of forced entry into the coop. The door was still latched from the outside. He walked into that chicken coop and found it half empty, like something had reached in and plucked the birds out one by one without leaving a trace. Then a week later, pigs disappeared from a farm 5 miles west. Big pigs too, not piglets. Full-grown hogs that weighed 300 pounds each. 3 of them gone from a locked pen. The farmer who owned them swore up and down that he'd secured everything before bed. Checked all the latches, made sure the gate was locked. Next morning, the gate was still locked, but 3 pigs were missing. Again, no blood, no tracks, no evidence of how they'd been taken or where they'd gone. Word spread fast in our community. In a rural area like this, news travels through the feed store, the diner, the gas station. Everyone was talking about it. Some people were scared, others were angry, wanted to organize hunting parties to track down whatever predator was responsible. A few older folks mentioned similar incidents from years back, stories about livestock vanishing without explanation. But most of us younger farmers brushed that off as exaggeration. We all figured it had to be wolves. Maybe a bear stocking up before winter hibernation. Made sense, right? So a bunch of us local farmers met up at the feed store one afternoon to talk it over. Everyone was on edge, sharing theories and stories. The consensus was that we probably had a predator problem and should keep our eyes open. I remember driving home that day thinking I was lucky I had cattle instead of smaller animals. Wolves and bears aren't usually bold enough to go after full-grown cattle, especially when they're fenced in close to buildings. Still, I'm not one to take chances. That evening after the feed store meeting, I dug out some trail cameras I'd bought years ago for hunting and never really used much. They'd been sitting in a box in the garage collecting dust. Figured it couldn't hurt to set them up around the property, see what was moving around at night. Maybe I'd catch a wolf or bear on camera and at least know what we were dealing with. I placed 4 of them strategically around the property. The first one went up on a pine tree at the tree line where the forest starts. aimed toward the back pasture where my cattle grazed. Second camera went near the barn, positioned to cover the main entrance and the area where I kept feed. Third one by the back pasture fence, covering a different angle of the same area. Fourth camera I positioned facing toward the house, just in case something got bold enough to approach the buildings. The cameras are motion activated, equipped with night vision and infrared flash. They timestamp every photo automatically. Good units, expensive when I bought them. I set them up to take a burst of 3 photos whenever motion was detected, figuring that would give me a better chance of identifying whatever triggered them. Took me about 2 hours to get them all positioned right, test them, make sure the batteries were fresh. By the time I finished, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping fast. I just wanted to see what predator was prowling around at night. Maybe catch a wolf on camera, maybe nothing at all. Part of me hoped the cameras would show nothing but deer and raccoons, that all the livestock disappearances were just coincidence or bad luck, that whatever had hit the other farms would pass us by and move on to easier targets. I had no idea what I was actually going to capture on those cameras. No idea that within days I'd be looking at something that would change everything I thought I knew about what lives in these mountains. The thing is, I was the only farmer in our area who raised cattle. Everyone else had chickens, pigs, goats, sheep, smaller animals, easier prey. So in the back of my mind, I figured whatever was out there would keep hitting the other farms and leave mine alone. That's what I told my wife anyway. She was worried after hearing about all the missing livestock, but I assured her we'd be fine. Our cattle were bigger, stronger, harder to take down. I even joked that wolves would rather have an easy meal than mess with an 800-pound cow. I was wrong. November 23rd. I'll never forget that date. I woke up just before dawn like I always do, around 5:30 when it's still dark outside. Pulled on my work boots, heavy coat, and headed out to feed the cattle. The routine I'd followed for 15 years without thinking about it. The air was bitter cold that morning, frost covering everything like a white blanket. My breath came out in thick clouds. My boots crunched on the frozen ground as I walked toward the back pasture. I was still half asleep, going through the motions on autopilot when I got to the fence and stopped dead in my tracks. Something was wrong. The cattle weren't crowding the fence, waiting for feed like they usually did. The herd looked smaller. I counted them once, then again, thinking maybe I'd miscounted in the dim pre-dawn light. But no, 3 of my yearling heifers were gone. Just gone. I counted the herd a 3rd time to be absolutely sure, moving along the fence line to get a better view. Checked every corner of the pasture, thinking maybe they were just hidden behind the others or lying down in a dip in the field that I couldn't see from where I stood. But no, 3 cattle, each weighing around 800 pounds, had vanished overnight. These weren't small animals. These were substantial livestock, worth good money, animals I'd raised from calves, and they were just gone. I checked the fence immediately. No breaks, no damage. The gate was still locked from the outside. I grabbed my flashlight even though the sun was starting to come up, and I searched that entire field. No blood, no tracks in the frost-covered grass, no drag marks, no signs of struggle, nothing. It was like they'd been plucked right out of the pasture by a giant invisible hand. My heart was pounding now, adrenaline flooding my system and waking me up fast. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. There's no way any animal could take 3 cattle that size without leaving evidence. A pack of wolves would have left blood everywhere, tracks all over, sections of torn fence where they'd dragged the carcasses through. A bear would have made noise, disturbed the other cattle, left claw marks somewhere. And how would they even get the cattle out over a 5-foot fence without knocking it down or leaving marks on the wood? Then I remembered the trail cameras. They'd been running all night, motion activated, watching. If something had come for my cattle, the cameras would have caught it. I practically ran back to check them, my hands shaking from cold and fear and confusion. Started with the camera near the house, pulled out the memory card, plugged it into the little viewer screen on the camera itself. The first camera showed normal stuff. Deer passing through around midnight, their eyes reflecting green in the infrared. A raccoon sniffing around the barn around 1 a.m. My farm dog making his rounds at 2, checking the perimeter like he does every night. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Second camera, same thing. Deer, a fox darting across the frame, my dog again. Third camera by the fence showed the cattle milling around, restless earlier in the night around 11, then settling down. But nothing that explained their disappearance. But the fourth camera, the one I'd positioned at the forest edge near where the cattle grazed, had captured something at 2:47 in the morning. The motion sensor had been triggered, multiple photos in the burst sequence. And when I pulled up the first image on the camera's little screen, my blood went cold. Actually felt it drain from my face, felt my stomach drop. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the camera. There, partially hidden behind the pine trees but clearly visible in the frame, was a face. A massive face covered in dark fur, caught perfectly in the camera's infrared flash. Snow was falling in the frame, white flakes suspended in the air, but the face was clear enough to see every detail. The eyes reflected the light with an amber glow, not the green reflection you get from deer or the white from cattle. Amber, like fire, and those eyes were staring directly at the camera, directly at where I'd mounted it, like it knew it was being watched, like it was staring back at me. The features were dark, almost human, but definitely not human. The face was broader than any man's, flatter, with a heavy brow ridge that cast shadows over those glowing eyes. The nose was wide and flat against the face. I could see what looked like lips, slightly parted, and the suggestion of teeth behind them. The head was covered in thick, dark hair or fur, matted and wild, hanging down past where I could see in the frame. Shoulders were visible too, massive and broad, wider than seemed possible for any living thing. The creature was partially concealed by the tree trunks, using them as cover, but I could see enough to know this wasn't a bear. Bears don't hide behind trees like that. Bears don't position themselves to watch and observe. This was deliberate, calculated. The creature had been standing there watching my cattle, evaluating them, choosing which ones to take. The height was impossible to determine from the photo since I couldn't see the full body, but based on where the head was positioned relative to the 6-foot tree trunks around it, this thing had to be at least 8 feet tall. Maybe more, and the shoulders suggested incredible strength, the kind of power that could easily handle an 800-pound cow. I stared at that image for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. Couldn't look away from it. Couldn't process what I was seeing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the camera steady. My mind was racing through explanations, trying to find one that made sense. Maybe it was a bear. Maybe it was someone in a costume, some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe the camera had malfunctioned, created some kind of digital glitch that looked like a face. But deep down, I knew this was real. This was what had taken my cattle. And I'd heard the old stories about Bigfoot in these mountains. Everyone who lives in this area has heard them. Campfire tales about hairy giants in the forest, stories passed down from the old-timers about encounters in the deep woods, rumors about people who'd seen things they couldn't explain. I'd always dismissed them as folklore, tourist bait, stories people told to make the wilderness seem more mysterious and exciting. But I was looking at it, right there on my trail camera, time-stamped and dated, and my 3 cattle were missing. The 2 facts connected in my mind with absolute certainty. This thing had taken them. Somehow, some way, this massive creature had come out of the forest in the middle of the night, and taken 3 800-pound animals without leaving a trace. The sheer strength that would require was terrifying to think about. I went back inside and found my wife in the kitchen making coffee. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. Asked me what happened. I didn't even know how to start explaining. Just handed her the camera and told her to look at the last photo. Watched her face as she stared at the screen. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. She looked at me with wide eyes and asked what it was, even though I think she already knew. I told her about the missing cattle. Told her I'd searched the entire pasture and found nothing. No blood, no tracks, no evidence. She stared at the photo again, then looked at me and said I needed to call the sheriff. Right now. Not later, not after I'd thought about it. Now. I hesitated because I didn't want to be that guy, the crazy person calling in a Bigfoot sighting. People would think I'd lost my mind. But she was insistent, almost desperate. Said this wasn't something we could handle alone. Said we had kids to think about. And she was right. The cattle were real. They were gone. And I needed to report it. I called the county sheriff's office around 7 in the morning. Told them I had missing livestock and needed someone to come take a look. A deputy arrived around 9 with the sheriff himself, which should have told me they were taking the recent report seriously. They were both good guys, professionals I'd known for years. I showed them the empty pasture first. Walked them through what I'd found that morning. They inspected the fence line, looked at the field, checked for tracks or signs of how the cattle might have been removed. The deputy kept suggesting conventional explanations. Maybe someone stole them with a trailer in the middle of the night. But there were no tire tracks anywhere near the pasture. The ground was frozen and would have shown any vehicle marks. Finally, I pulled out my phone and showed them the trail camera image. Both of them went quiet, just stood there staring at my phone screen. The sheriff asked to see the actual camera and memory card, wanted to verify it wasn't doctored or tampered with. So we walked to the tree line and I showed him the camera still mounted to the tree, untouched. He examined it carefully, checked the date and timestamp, looked at the other photos before and after the one of the creature. The sheriff let out a long breath and said something I didn't expect. He told me he'd seen similar reports over the years, usually dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications, but the missing cattle were real. 3 healthy animals gone without a trace. He couldn't explain it, had no conventional explanation that fit the evidence. The deputy kept trying to make it make sense. Maybe the cattle wandered off somehow and the photo was just a bear. But I pointed out that the fence was intact and locked, and that thing in the photo wasn't shaped like any bear I'd ever seen. The proportions were wrong. The face was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. The sheriff took copies of the image and filed an official report. Then he told me to be careful, keep my family inside at night, stay armed. He admitted there wasn't much they could do. No crime scene to process, no physical evidence except the photo. He said they'd keep an eye out, patrol the area more frequently, but beyond that, their hands were tied. Before they left, the sheriff mentioned something that stuck with me. He said another rancher 2 counties over had lost livestock years ago under similar circumstances. Strange disappearances, no evidence, reports of something large and upright moving through the woods at night. That rancher had moved away within 6 months, just packed up and left his family land. The sheriff looked me in the eye when he said it, and I could tell he was wondering if I'd do the same. After the sheriff left, I spent the rest of that day preparing. First thing I did was move all my remaining cattle to the front pasture, much closer to the barn and within sight of the house. Set up floodlights all around the property, pointing out toward the tree line and the fields. I checked and cleaned my rifles, made sure they were loaded and ready. Kept a .308 by the back door and a 12 gauge in the bedroom. My wife was terrified. She wanted to take the kids and stay with her sister in town until this was over. I understood. Hell, part of me wanted to go with them. But I couldn't just abandon the farm and the animals. This was our livelihood, our home. If I let fear chase me off my own land, what would I be left with? I convinced her to stay, promised I'd keep everyone safe, installed new batteries in all the trail cameras, and added 2 more for better coverage. Then I waited. That first night, I barely slept. Kept my rifle next to the bed, listening to every sound outside. The house creaks and settles normally, but that night, every noise made me jump. The cattle were restless too. I could hear them from the bedroom, making nervous sounds, moving around more than usual. My farm dog stayed on the porch all night, alert and tense. He's normally pretty brave, but now he wouldn't go anywhere near the tree line. Even during the day, he'd stop at the edge of the yard and refuse to go further. Nothing happened that first night, or the second, or the third. But the tension didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. My wife and kids barely left the house. I spent my days doing farm work with a rifle slung over my shoulder. Started to wonder if maybe it was over, if whatever had taken my cattle had moved on to somewhere else. Then came the 4th night after the disappearance. I was lying in bed around midnight, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling. Then I heard it, a deep, low sound coming from the forest. Not quite a growl, not quite a call, something in between that I'd never heard before. It echoed across the fields, and the cattle immediately started panicking. I could hear them pressing against the barn fence, making distressed noises. I grabbed my rifle and went to the back porch. The floodlights were on, illuminating the yard and pasture, but beyond that was just darkness and trees. I scanned the tree line with my spotlight, sweeping it back and forth. Nothing visible. But then the sound came again, closer this time. And it was coming from a different direction than before. That's when I realized it was moving, circling the property through the woods, testing the perimeter. My heart was hammering in my chest. I raised my rifle and fired a warning shot straight up into the air. The crack of the gunshot split the night, and immediately everything went silent. The sound from the forest stopped. The cattle quieted down. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I stayed on that porch for over an hour, shivering in the cold, rifle ready. But I heard nothing else. Whatever it was had backed off. For now. 3 nights later, around 2 a.m, my wife shook me awake. She'd heard something outside, scratching sounds, heavy thumping near the barn. I got dressed fast, grabbed my rifle and flashlight, and headed out. The moon was nearly full that night, bright enough to see pretty well even without the flashlight. I could hear the cattle making distressed sounds as I walked toward the barn. When I rounded the corner, I saw it. The Bigfoot was standing at the fence, reaching over toward the cattle with one massive arm. The creatures were pressed against the far side of the enclosure, as far from it as they could get. It had to be 8 or 9 feet tall, maybe more. The shoulders were massive, broader than any man's, and its arms were long, extending past where human arms would end. Dark matted fur covered its entire body. In the moonlight, I could see its profile, the sloped forehead, the way its body tapered from those huge shoulders down to narrower hips. Then it turned and looked directly at me. We locked eyes, I don't know for how long. Felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Those eyes were amber-colored, reflective, like an animal's, but with something else there. Intelligence, awareness. It wasn't just looking at me, it was evaluating me. Deciding what to do, I raised my rifle with shaking hands, aimed it right at the creature's chest. My finger was on the trigger. All I had to do was pull. But I couldn't. Something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was the uncanny human-like quality of the thing. Or maybe some part of my brain recognized that killing it would cross a line I couldn't uncross. The Bigfoot watched me for another moment, then took one step back. Then another. It retreated slowly toward the tree line, never turning its back on me, never running. Just backing away with careful, deliberate steps. When it reached the edge of the forest, it paused, looked at me one more time, then disappeared into the shadows. I stood there for another 20 minutes after the Bigfoot disappeared, heart pounding like it was trying to break through my ribs, rifle still raised and ready, waiting to see if it would come back. My arms were shaking from holding the gun up for so long. The cold was seeping through my coat, but I barely felt it. All my attention was focused on that tree line, watching for any movement, any sign that the creature was returning. Finally, I lowered the gun and went inside. My legs felt weak, unsteady. I'd just come face to face with something that wasn't supposed to exist and somehow survived. Told my wife what I'd seen, tried to describe the size of it, the way it moved, the intelligence in those eyes. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with every word. Neither of us slept the rest of that night. Just sat in the living room with all the lights on, me with the rifle across my lap, her with her phone in hand ready to call for help. Waiting for dawn and hoping that thing wouldn't come back. When morning finally came and the sun started rising, I went back to the fence where I'd seen the Bigfoot. Needed to verify it had been real, that I hadn't somehow imagined the whole thing in the dark. And there, on the wooden rail where I'd seen it reaching over toward the cattle, I found massive handprints. The wood was old, weathered, and the prints showed clearly in the frost that had formed overnight. Each print was at least twice the size of my own hand. I placed my hand next to one for comparison, and it looked like a child's hand next to an adult's. The prints showed 4 distinct fingers and an opposable thumb, arranged like a human hand but so much larger it didn't seem possible. I took photos with my phone from multiple angles, then measured them with a tape measure I'd brought from the barn. Nearly 14 inches long from wrist to fingertip. The span across the palm was almost 8 inches. In the soft ground near the fence, partially protected from the frost by an overhang of the rail, I found footprints too. Enormous tracks at least 18 inches long, maybe more. They were human-like in shape with 5 distinct toes, but the proportions were wrong. Wider than a human foot, the toes thicker and more powerful looking. The prints were deep, pushed into the half-frozen ground at least 2 inches, showing how much weight the creature carried. I took more photos, measured those too, documented everything I could see. The stride between the prints was massive, at least 5 feet from one to the next. Whatever made these tracks had been walking with confident, powerful steps, not lumbering or uncertain. There were 3 clear prints leading away from the fence toward the tree line. Then the ground got too hard and frozen to show more tracks. But it was enough, more than enough. This thing was real, it was massive, and it had been standing right here at my fence reaching for my cattle. Then I called the sheriff again. He came out the next day with the deputy. They saw the handprints, saw the footprints, took their own photos. But they admitted they were out of their depth. No protocol for this kind of situation. The sheriff suggested calling fish and game, but I refused. Last thing I needed was a bunch of government officials crawling all over my property, maybe declaring it some kind of protected habitat or investigation site. I just wanted the thing to leave my property alone. Over the next week, signs of the Bigfoot appeared regularly around the property, almost like it was marking territory or sending messages. Every morning I'd find something new, something that proved it had been here during the night while we were inside trying to sleep. I'd find tree branches snapped at heights no bear could reach, thick limbs 8 or 9 feet off the ground, broken cleanly like someone had just grabbed them with both hands and twisted till they snapped. These weren't small branches either. Some were as thick as my arm, the kind that would take real force to break. Discovered rocks stacked in strange formations near the property line, perfect pyramid shapes that definitely weren't natural. 3 or 4 rocks balanced on top of each other, some of them the size of bowling balls. I'd never seen anything like it. My kids didn't do it. Nobody else had been on the property. And animals don't stack rocks. It had to be the Bigfoot, leaving markers or signs, though I had no idea what they were meant to communicate. Warning? Territory claim? Just proof it could manipulate objects with precision? I didn't know. At night, I'd hear wood-knocking sounds echoing through the forest. Rhythmic, deliberate thumping that carried for miles in the cold night air. Thump, 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 3 quick strikes, then silence. Then a minute later, answering thumps from somewhere else in the woods, a different location, different direction. Then more knocks from a third location, like they were communicating, coordinating, like there was a whole network of them out there in the darkness, talking to each other about what to do about the humans in the farmhouse. The trail cameras continued to catch the creature, sometimes multiple times in a single night. The images showed it getting bolder, coming closer. One photo from the 3rd night showed it at the edge of the pasture again, standing motionless between 2 trees, just watching the cattle. Another image from the 5th night showed it much closer to the barn, maybe 30 yards from the building. Its eyes glowed amber in the camera flash, focused and intent. But the most disturbing photo came on the 7th night. The camera I'd positioned facing the house captured an image at 3:17 in the morning. The Bigfoot was standing maybe 30 feet from the back windows, partially hidden by the corner of the porch. It was looking directly toward where my family slept, just standing there in the darkness, still and patient, watching our house. When I saw that photo the next morning, my blood ran cold. This thing knew where we lived, knew where our bedroom windows were. It had been standing outside while we slept, close enough to hear us breathing if the windows had been open. My wife was at her breaking point by then, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. The constant tension, the lack of sleep, the knowledge that something massive and unknown was prowling around our property every night. The kids were scared too, refused to play outside anymore, even during daylight hours. They'd ask questions I couldn't answer. Is the monster real? Is it going to hurt us? Why won't it leave? I had no good answers. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom entirely and set up camp in the living room with my rifle across my lap, just dozing in the recliner, jerking awake at every sound. The exhaustion was getting to me. I was snapping at everyone, couldn't focus on normal farm work, jumping at shadows. Then one night, around 3 in the morning, everything escalated. I was half asleep in the recliner when I heard heavy footsteps on the back porch. Not the soft padding of an animal moving on 4 legs. These were heavy, deliberate footfalls, the kind a large biped would make. 2-legged steps, each one making the wooden boards of the porch creak and groan under substantial weight. My dog went absolutely crazy, barking like I'd never heard him bark before. A frantic, desperate sound that said he knew something terrible was out there. I grabbed my rifle and moved as quietly as I could toward the back door. The footsteps continued, slow and methodical, moving across the porch from one end to the other. Then they stopped right in front of the door. I could hear breathing on the other side, heavy and deep. Then something began testing the door, not trying to break it down with force, but pushing against it, testing its strength, seeing how much it would give. The door is solid oak, built to last, with a heavy deadbolt and a chain lock, but it groaned under the pressure. The whole frame shook. I could see the door flex inward slightly with each push. Whatever was out there had incredible strength. If it really wanted in, I wasn't sure the door would hold. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I yelled through the door, told whatever it was to leave, get away from my house. heard my own voice shaking, higher pitched than normal, fear coming through clear as day. The pushing stopped. For a moment, there was complete silence except for my dog still barking. Then I heard those footsteps again, moving away from the door, crossing the porch, down the steps. I watched through the window as a massive dark shape walked across my yard toward the barn. Could see its silhouette against the snow, huge and unmistakable. This time I wasn't frozen with indecision or fear. I was angry. This thing had crossed a line, coming to my door, testing it, threatening my family and our own home. I threw open the door and stepped onto the porch with my rifle raised. The Bigfoot was maybe 40 yards away, heading toward where the cattle were penned, moving with that same unhurried confidence like it owned the place. I aimed low and fired, deliberately missing, trying to scare it off without actually hitting it. The bullet kicked up dirt and snow about 10 feet from the creature, close enough to make the point. It stopped immediately and turned, looked at me with that same calculating stare I'd seen before. Those amber eyes glowing in the darkness. We stood there facing each other for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Then it did something that chilled me to my absolute core. It howled. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard in my life. Not an animal howl like a wolf or coyote. This was something else entirely. Terrifying and mournful at the same time. A sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. The howl started low and built in intensity, echoing across the valley, carrying for miles in the cold night air. It went on for maybe 10 seconds, this long, haunting cry that made every hair on my body stand up. And then, from the forest behind the Bigfoot, other howls answered. Multiple voices calling back and forth in the darkness. I counted at least 3 different sources, maybe more. The sounds came from different directions, different distances, some close, some far away. They were communicating, coordinating, letting each other know what was happening. And I realized with absolute certainty that there was more than one of them out there. There was a family group, maybe a whole clan, and I'd just provoked them. The Bigfoot near my barn let out one more howl, shorter this time, almost like a reply to the others. Then it turned and walked away, not running, not hurrying, just walking with steady, powerful strides toward the tree line. It disappeared into the shadows between the trees, but I could hear them calling to each other for the next hour, those eerie howls and wood knocks echoing through the forest. Multiple creatures out there in the darkness, talking about what to do about the human who'd just shot at one of them. I stayed on that porch until sunrise, rifle ready, surrounded by those sounds, knowing I was completely outmatched. Knowing that if they decided to come at us as a group, there wasn't much I could do to stop them. The next evening, just after sunset, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. Couldn't keep my family in a constant state of terror. Couldn't spend every night wondering if tonight would be the night those things decided to come through a window or knock down a door. I needed to face this, to make some kind of stand. My wife begged me not to go, said I was being stupid, that I'd get myself killed. Maybe she was right. But I took my rifle, my spotlight, and walked toward the tree line. It was getting dark fast, that time of evening where shadows blend together and it's hard to make out shapes in the distance. When I reached the edge of the forest, I stopped and shined my light into the trees, called out into the darkness, told whatever was out there that I wasn't leaving, that this was my land, my home. My voice sounded small against the vast silence of the forest. I waited, breath-forming clouds in the freezing air. Then I saw movement, not one Bigfoot, but 3. They emerged from different angles, surrounding me in a wide semicircle. 2 of them were massive, probably males if such distinctions even apply to these things. The third was slightly smaller but still enormous compared to a human. They stood at the tree line maybe 40 yards away, just watching me. I kept my rifle ready but didn't aim it, didn't point it at any of them. Just held it in a ready position while my heart tried to hammer its way out of my chest. The largest Bigfoot took a step forward. I stood my ground, didn't back away. We stared at each other across that distance, man and creature, in a moment of pure tension where anything could happen. Then the big one did something I didn't expect. It reached down, picked up a large branch, and threw it. Not at me, past me toward the farm. The branch was thick, heavy, but the Bigfoot tossed it like it weighed nothing. It sailed over my head and landed with a heavy thud in the field behind me, at least 30 yards from where I stood. It was a warning, a demonstration of power. The message was clear. They could have done whatever they wanted to me, to my family, to my farm. But they'd chosen not to. This was their territory too, and they were making that clear. They weren't going to be driven off by a man with a gun and some floodlights. I understood, finally understood. I couldn't win this through force or intimidation. These creatures were stronger, more numerous, and knew this land better than I ever would. Slowly, carefully, I backed away. Kept my eyes on them as I retreated step by step toward my fence line. They watched but didn't follow. When I reached the fence, they turned as one and melted back into the forest. I walked back to the house shaking, not just from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. I'd come face to face with something that shouldn't exist, and somehow we'd reached an understanding without a word being spoken. That night, my wife and I made some decisions. We weren't leaving. This was our home, our livelihood, and we weren't going to be chased off, but we needed to change our approach. The next morning, I moved all the cattle to the front pasture, closer to the road and other neighbors, reinforced all the fences, added more lights. But I also did something different, something my wife thought was crazy but I felt was necessary. I started leaving large cuts of meat at the tree line, not to feed them exactly, but as an offering, a peace gesture, a way of showing that I respected their territory and wasn't trying to drive them away, just protect what was mine. Over the following weeks, the meat disappeared each night. Trail cameras showed the Bigfoot taking it and leaving. No more attempts to get to the cattle, no more approaches to the house, no more testing our doors in the middle of the night. Whatever understanding we'd reached seemed to be holding. The sheriff checked in regularly, asked if we wanted to make the story public. I refused every time. Last thing I needed was my farm turning into some kind of Bigfoot tourist attraction. Thrill seekers tramping through my property, camera crews wanting interviews, people calling me a liar or a hoaxer. No thanks. This was between me and whatever lived in those woods. Slowly, carefully, life returned to something resembling normal. My wife and kids relaxed, though they still wouldn't go near the backwoods. The dog stayed close to the house, but stopped barking at night. The cattle settled down, though I noticed they still avoided the back pasture even after I moved them up front. Some instinct warning them away. 2 months passed with no major incidents. I still checked the trail cameras every morning. Occasionally I'd catch glimpses of the Bigfoot in the distance, watching from the forest, but it didn't come close anymore. Kept to its side of the invisible line we'd established that night. I kept my rifles loaded and ready, but I didn't need them. The 3 missing cattle never turned up, no remains, no evidence of what happened to them. They'd simply vanished, and I had to accept I'd never know their fate. The livestock losses at other farms in the area continued for a while, then gradually stopped. Talk at the feed store moved on to other topics. People forgot or convinced themselves it had been wolves after all. But I know the truth. Those creatures are still out there. Winter came on hard after that, snow falling day after day until everything was buried under 3 feet of white. the forest became even more impenetrable, the trees heavy with snow, the trails I used to walk completely covered. But I kept up my routine with the meat offerings, leaving cuts of venison and beef at the tree line every few days. Kept the cameras running despite the cold that drained their batteries faster. Kept my watch, my vigilance, my preparation. The trail camera still captures images occasionally, usually once or twice a week now. Always at night when the snow is falling and visibility is limited. Always the same Bigfoot, I think, though it's hard to be completely certain. The large male, always keeping its distance now, staying at the edge of the range where the camera can barely pick it up. Never crossing the invisible boundary we'd somehow agreed upon that night when I walked to the tree line and faced them down. I've kept the original photo, the one from that first morning. Sometimes I show it to other ranchers when we talk about predator problems. Most of them laugh it off, call it fake, say it's just a bear or a guy in a costume. But a few, the ones who've seen things themselves, just nod quietly. They know. They've had their own encounters, their own unexplained losses. They just don't talk about it publicly. What gets me is how intelligent they are. That's what most people don't understand. These aren't just big animals. They think, they plan, they communicate with each other. The way that Bigfoot threw that branch past me instead of at me. The way they coordinated their approach that night. The way they've respected the boundary since then. That's not animal behavior, that's something else. I think about that final confrontation a lot, how they could have killed me easily, 3 of them, 1 of me, out there alone in the dark. But they chose not to. Maybe they recognized something in me, another creature defending its territory and family. Maybe they understood that killing me would bring more humans, more guns, more problems. Or maybe they just didn't see me as a threat worth eliminating. My wife asks me sometimes if I regret not leaving, not packing up and moving to town like that other rancher did. Honestly, I don't know. This farm is in my blood. My grandfather built the house, my father expanded the herd, and I've put 15 years of my life into this place. Giving it up would feel like surrender, like admitting those creatures have more right to this land than I do. But at the same time, I know it's not over, can't be over. Winter is in full force now and game is getting scarce. The Bigfoot will need to eat, will get hungry as the season drags on and the forest provides less food. Part of me wonders if our agreement will hold when desperation sets in, when survival instinct overrides whatever understanding we reached. I know it's only a matter of time before they come back. Maybe this winter, maybe next year, maybe a decade from now. But they'll come back. They always do. This is their home too, has been for longer than humans have been keeping cattle here. We're the intruders, really, not them. We just forget that because we built the fences and the barns and declared the land ours. And when they do come back, I'll be ready. My rifle is clean and loaded by the door. Trail cameras are positioned and working. Spotlights are aimed at the tree line. But more than that, I'm mentally prepared. I've looked into the eyes of something that shouldn't exist and survived. I've made my stand and held my ground. This farm is mine, has been my family's for generations. And I'll defend it against whatever comes out of those woods. The Bigfoot knows this now, knows I'm not running, knows I'm not prey. And that might be the only thing keeping an uneasy peace between us. For now, the cattle are safe. My family is safe. But I never let my guard down, can't let my guard down. Every night before bed, I look out the back window toward the dark tree line, wondering if tonight is the night the creature returns. Wondering if the next time we meet face to face, there will be another understanding, or if one of us won't walk away. I check the rifle one more time, switch off the lights, and try to sleep. But I never sleep deeply anymore. Always listening, always aware. Outside, snow falls silently over the empty fields. The cattle huddle together in the front pasture, safe for tonight. The cameras watch and record, motion sensors primed. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, something watches and waits. Something massive and intelligent and patient. I tell people this story when they ask about the missing cattle. Most don't believe me. That's fine. I'm not trying to convince anyone. Just telling what happened, what's still happening. Because it's not over. Not really. This is just a pause, a temporary truce in a conflict as old as humans settling in wilderness. The trail camera is still there, mounted to that tree at the forest edge, still taking photos every night when motion triggers it. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch that face again in the frame. Those amber eyes reflecting the flash. That broad, dark face watching from the shadows, reminding me that we share this land, whether we like it or not. Reminding me that some things are bigger than fences and property lines and human claims to ownership. Reminding me that I'm not alone out here, and neither is the Bigfoot. For more interesting stories, check this out.